Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a source you're interested in and, well, we pull out the most interesting bits, the valuable insight.
Get right to the heart of it.
Exactly. So today, we're jumping into a review you sent us. It's about the 1971 sci-fi film, The Omega Man.
Ah, Charlton Heston. Classic.
Right. And it's based on Richard Matheson's novella, I Am Legend, a really foundational book for post-apocalyptic fiction.
Huge influence, yeah.
So for you, our listener, the learner, the goal here is pretty straightforward, give you a clear but also engaging understanding of this movie, its context, themes, why it sort of still matters.
We want to surface the cool stuff without getting bogged down in, every single detail.
Precisely. So picture this. The world's been ravaged by biological warfare. Charlton Heston plays Robert Neville. Seems like he's the last uninfected guy in L.A.
Seems like.
And then you've got the family. This cult, basically, albino, plague-mutated survivors who are not fans of the old world.
They're nocturnal. They hate technology. It's quite a setup.
Okay, so this review we're looking at. First thing it flags, and this seems important, is don't expect a straight adaptation of I Am Legend.
No, definitely not. The review calls it more an interpretation, which feels right.
Yeah, it sounds like it takes the basic premise, but then swerves hard into, 70s action territory. I saw the phrase, shirtless Heston machine guns.
Huh. Yeah, that paints a picture, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Very different from the book's quiet internal dread.
Totally different. The book is so much about his loneliness, his psychology.
Right, and the film, while it has that, it definitely amps up the external conflict. It brings in these biblical overtones, too, and a lot of counterculture allegory, which is super interesting.
Very much of its time, then, reflecting the early 70s.
Absolutely. The anxieties, the style, it's all baked in.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, how a modern adaptation would reflect our anxieties.
Good question. So the review goes into the plot. It mentions this really striking opening.
The empty city.
Yeah. Silent, eerie, L.A., Neville driving around talking to mannequins. That sounds incredibly atmospheric.
Oh, it is. That image, the mannequins.
Yeah.
It just screams isolation, doesn't it? Before the main conflict even starts.
What do you think they add? The mannequins, specifically.
Well, they're human-shaped voids, aren't they? They look like people, but there's nothing there. So him talking to them, it just hits home how utterly alone he is. Maybe losing it a little bit, too.
Yeah, visual storytelling right there.
Definitely.
And the core conflict, the review frames it as science versus, religion, or maybe regression. Neville's science against the family's rejection of it all.
It's that classic post-apocalyptic trope, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The scientist trying to preserve knowledge versus the group that blames the old ways, blames technology for the fall.
They want to reset, but on their terms.
Exactly. A forced step back, like you said. It taps into that fear of progress, maybe, or what happens when progress goes wrong.
And it's not just survival. The review mentions other plot points. There's romance with Lisa, this hope for a cure, betrayal, and then this ending. A tragic final act, a Christ-like sacrifice. That's heavy stuff.
It really is. That tells you the film is aiming for something bigger than just action, right? It's allegory.
So big themes over subtle character work, maybe?
That's what the review suggests. Big, broad themes and moments. The sacrifice angle really pushes that Messiah figure idea. One person carrying the weight for everyone else's potential future. Common in these stories.
Okay, let's talk characters. Heston as Neville. The review says, peak Heston.
Gruff, commanding.
Cocky, haunted. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Maybe less internal than the book's Neville, but the review credits Heston's, sheer star power for carrying a lot of it.
He had that presence, but who else stands out?
Rosalind Cash as Lisa. The review calls her a standout.
How so?
Cool, defiant, refreshingly modern. Apparently brings real emotional weight and has great chemistry with Heston.
Interesting.
And crucially, their interracial romance. The review highlights this as groundbreaking for a big studio film back in '71.
Wow, yeah. That adds a whole social dimension, doesn't it? Beyond just the sci-fi plot.
It really does. It suggests themes of connection, humanity, crossing boundaries, even as the world's falling apart. Probably quite impactful for audiences them.
Still is, I'd imagine. And the villain. Matthias.
Anthony Zerbe.
Yeah.
Described as wonderfully theatrical, blind albino cult leader, hates technology.
A twisted prophet.
Sounds like a great antagonist, that rejection of technology. It's a common theme, but making him a prophet figure adds a layer.
It really does. This idea that technology was the original sin, almost. And his followers, the family.
Monk robes and sunglasses.
The review says they're this mix of menacing and maybe a bit campy.
Okay.
But their ideology, their reason for wanting to burn it all down is called fascinating, even if maybe not fully explored.
So the performances lean into archetypes, which kind of works for this pulpy dystopia.
Seems to be the takeaway, yeah. It fits the overall style.
Speaking of style, let's get into the look and feel.
Yeah.
Boris Sagal's direction.
Praised as economical and stylish, especially those wide shots of empty LA, really emphasizes the loneliness. Can you picture a specific moment like that early on?
Oh yeah, those opening drives. Just Neville's car moving through these huge empty streets, towering buildings, no people, no movement.
Yeah.
Just silence and scale. It nails that feeling of being the last man on Earth.
Yeah, I can see that. And the review mentions a visual contrast, too.
Between the sunlit ruins by day and the family's firelit rituals at night.
Oh, a metaphor.
Seems like it. Old world versus this new, darker dogma emerging. Light and shadow. Literally.
Makes sense. What about the action?
Described as sparse, but effective.
Mm-hmm.
So not constant, but impactful when it happens.
Okay. And then there's this religious imagery cropping up again.
Yeah, Neville is a sort of messiah, blood is salvation, the family as inquisitors. It's woven in pretty heavily.
Interesting. So it's mixing disaster with this very 70s aesthetic.
Definitely. The review calls it a groovy post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
Leather jackets, funky music, revolution vibes alongside the end of the world. It's a unique blend.
And the sound, how does that play into it?
Well, silence is apparently key. Huge stretches of quiet, emphasizing the emptiness.
Broken by...
Neville talking to himself, helicopters, and the family's chants, which must be pretty jarring. Really ramps up the tension.
Creates that suspense. And the score, Ron Grainer.
Yeah, the Doctor Who guy. Apparently it shifts a lot. Jazzy, mellow stuff for the daytime isolation, then tense, menacing for the nighttime threat. Mirrors the visuals.
And they use songs from the era, too.
Like playing the Woodstock soundtrack on repeat. The review calls it weirdly poignant counterculture commentary, like Ghosts of the Past.
Okay, let's pull back and look at the big picture. Themes, interpretations.
Right. The review positions it as a sci-fi parable soaked in Cold War anxiety. Yeah. Which makes total sense for 1971.
Definitely. But also themes that still resonate, right? Science versus faith.
Technophobia. Who gets blamed when things fall apart?
Neville's isolation, losing his identity.
Right. And that whole Messiah complex thing we talked about, the sacrifice, plus that idea of post-hippie disillusionment. Could peace and love really survive the apocalypse?
So the key takeaway is less horror, more allegory.
That's how the review frames it. It's using the sci-fi setup to talk about bigger societal ideas, even if some feel, a bit dated now.
Okay, but let's be balanced. Criticisms. What didn't work so well, according to the review?
Well, apparently the family, the cult, feels a bit underdeveloped. Their ideas aren't explored as deeply as they could be.
Okay, missed opportunity maybe.
Possibly. Also mentions some moments tipping into unintended camp. Maybe some action scenes feel a bit silly now.
Could happen with older films. Anything else?
The middle section, focusing on Neville and Lisa's relationship, apparently drags a little for some.
Pacing issues.
Yeah. And maybe the biggest one for book fans, it lacks the deep psychological dive of I Am Legend. Focuses more on external action than internal struggle.
That's always the challenge with adaptations, isn't it? What to keep, what to change.
It is. But the review counters these points by praising the film's overall bold aesthetic and thematic ambition. It acknowledges it was trying something significant for its time.
Yeah. So despite flaws, it had vision.
Exactly. And it highlights moments that really land.
Right.
Neville's drives through empty LA. We keep coming back to that image. Matthias's creepy firelit rituals.
The romance.
There's line.
You're hostile only to your kind. Memorable exchange. And that final, slow, symbolic sacrifice scene.
Those are the takeaways, the memorable bits. So, wrapping up the review's overall stance, it calls the Omega Man a time capsule.
Yeah, of early 70s post-apocalyptic cinema. A mix of action, religious parable, even a bit of a psychedelic fever dream.
Not the book, but a reimagining through that era's lens. Neville as a rugged martyr for reason and resistance.
Pretty much sums it up.
And the final verdict from the reviewer.
A solid 8 out of 10. Praised for being stylish, eerie, symbolic, that blend of Messiah myth and 70s action pulp. Groovy apocalypse cinema with soul is the final phrase.
Groovy apocalypse cinema with soul. I like that.
Me too. So for you, the learner, hopefully this deep dive gives you a solid feel for the Omega Man. We've touched on its adaptation choices, the plot, characters, style, themes.
The good, the maybe not so good, what makes it memorable. You should have a pretty comprehensive overview now.
Exactly. A concise but thorough grasp of the film and why it still pops up.
Hopefully mission accomplished there.
So that leads us to one final thought to leave you with. The Omega Man deals a lot with that science versus faith clash, technology's role, societal collapse, thinking about our world now, all our tech, our own anxieties, what things happening today might future generations see as, the seeds of our potential apocalypse, or at least a major transformation.
That's a heavy question. Worth pondering how those allegories of the film might still reflect things today.
Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.